Welcome to the Regen Brands podcast. This is a place for consumers, operators, and investors to learn about the consumer brands supporting regenerative agriculture and how they're changing the world. This is your host, Kyle, joined by my co-host, AC, who's going to take us into the episode.
On this episode, we have Andres and Juan, the co-founders of Chiki Chiki Boom Boom. Chiki Chiki Boom Boom is supporting regenerative agriculture with their line of enhanced water beverages packed with regenerative and organic botanicals. They market the product to consumers as Reggaeton In A Bottle and a tool to regenerate your body. In this episode, we learn about Chiki's regenerative organic farm in the Valley of Longevity in southern Ecuador. Andres schools us on how the brand architecture was built to encompass reggaeton, authentic Latin flavors and culture, plus lofty sustainability goals. And we dive deep into their current farming operation and the commercial traction of the brand. This was a fun one, y'all. Let's dive in. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Regen Brands podcast. Really excited today to have our friends Andres and Juan from Chiki Chiki Boom Boom with us. So definitely, I think, the best all-time brand name that we've had. So welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
Yes,
AC stole my thunder. I was going to talk about how this is by far the most fun brand name and just branding that I think we've had on the show so far.
For sure.
So super, super cool. Also know that there's always like these pre-conversations that happen before the recording that, you know, the listeners don't get to hear about how this is like a fun podcast. We try to make it a good time. Today I want to kick it off with something different. You know, I want to know what everybody had for breakfast briefly. So, you know, Juan, let's start with you, man. What did you have for breakfast today in Ecuador?
Well, since I'm very grateful and happy to be at the Valley of Longevity here in Vilcabamba, Ecuador. I'm in an organic agroecological farm, So I obviously had for breakfast my green juice. That was amazing. I still have some, but I doubt you guys could have my breakfast, but it was definitely great.
I'm really glad you're not eating like cereal while you're in the Valley of Longevity. That'd just be
right.
The ultimate sin. Andreas, I know you're in NYC today doing the grind. Did you end up having like a classic bagel? What'd you end up going with?
No, I actually didn't eat yet. Well, I kind of started eating. So when I just sat down to start the podcast, I had bought a sandwich in the supermarket that I was just at prior selling Chiki in. And they gave me this sandwich.
Nice.
I'm not kidding you. It's this big. It was like the size of like a miniature football. So I guess it's like breakfast and lunch. But
Nice.
So yeah, it was like a turkey avocado sandwich,
Love it.
Solid. Good move. AC, what'd you go for?
Coffee and a smoothie. My usual lean, procedure before we go record.
Lean machine. And what'd you put in your smoothie? This is important.
Berries, protein powder, peanut butter powder, greens powder, coconut milk, organic coconut milk, and one big ass avocado every time.
Nice. Hell yeah. I went with I had an apple, which was a little bit mealy and not very flavorful, and I was really bummed out. Bought it from Localvore, so it's my local fruit place, but it must not have been grown regeneratively, unfortunately. So apple with some peanut butter and some bone broth. I had this kettle on fire Regen chicken bone broth. So
there you go.
All good. Cool. Well, hey, that was you. That was new. That was different. But want to give. Let's get back to the podcast. Want to give for those who are not familiar with Chiki Chiki Boom. One, Andres, give us like the lay of the land. What is the product? Where can people find it today? Why do people want to drink it? Give us just a quick overview of the brand.
Yeah, so Chiki is a organic, plant-based tropical water. It's made of botanicals. It's meant to regenerate your body. It's 3 grams of sugar, 20 calories. Think of it like basically an organic plant-based vitamin water. It's very, very hydrating, very refreshing, and it sits in the flavored water aisle.
Got it. And how many SKUs do you have, and what are the flavors?
We have 3 SKUs. Our top selling SKU is the mango passion fruit, and then we have strawberry lemon, and then we just have plain lemon.
Nice.
That passion fruit is fire.
That's like
next level.
That's by far the number one. It's number one literally in every single store that we sell at. It's never been a situation where it's not been number one in like over 3,000 stores, which is
Wow.
nuts.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you mentioned
That's
3,000 stores. Where can people find you today in the U.S.?
Yeah, so depending, where you are, we have more of a concentration, for instance, in SoCal and Florida and New York, and then we are nationwide in CVS. So,
Wow.
and then obviously in a lot of pockets in natural stores across the country. So just depending on the region, there's a big Florida focus. So, for instance, in Florida, we're in Publix, Walmart, CVS, GoPuff. And then in New York, we're going to be probably like 500 bodegas by the end of August, early September. And then in SoCal, mainly independent and natural stores. And then obviously sprinkle in a bunch of CVS locations across the country.
Yeah, man.
Heck yeah. Well, congrats on that distribution. I know that's not easy to gain. It sounds like, you're Omni Metro and a few different channels there. So kudos to the early success.
Yeah. And
Thank you.
this is such an interesting, I think, brand for us to talk about, and I'm so excited because it's like a culmination of all these things that are just awesome, right? It's like we have the Latin influence, the reggaeton influence, we have the sustainability and the regenerative raw materials, we have actually a real better for you enhanced water / hydration product, where I think a lot of those are not that much better for people. So there's a lot in there. But y'all two break down for us how this whole thing came to be and how y'all, started this brand.
Yeah, so about 5 years ago, I met Juan, and during that time, I was kind of in this like Indiana Jones type of search uh, in Latin America, looking to bring a sustainable, better for you product to the global market that was Latin inspired, that had authenticity, that had a real story. I'd come from fashion. I'd built close to 10 brands in fashion, was pretty burnt out at the time, and I wanted to really focus on doing something in the impact space, food, beverage, wellness, culture, and selfishly reggaeton, because I love reggaeton. And, during that time, I met Juan, and we started to talk. And Juan's background was in agriculture and food and beverage back in Ecuador, where he was born and raised. I was born and raised in LA, but my family's from Ecuador, and we shared a lot of the same ideas and visions in terms of what the future should look like for the food system. And he even went further in telling me like, how do we fix it, and how do we actually put our watermark on the space. So that's when we started talking, and he was telling me about this beverage, and I had tasted it before in my vacations in Ecuador, but he had drank it every single day. I think it's better for him to explain you kind of his
Yeah.
experience with the drink, because when he told it to me, I knew that was it instantaneously. So Juan, it's better if you explain this part.
Hold on, one. Also, when you met Andres in this Indiana Jones cycle, was he wearing like the hat, had the whip, like the whole nine, like leather, cruising around Ecuador?
Oh yeah,
or like
yeah.
I need like the visual.
Yeah. So actually, I met Andres at the Standard Hotel in West Hollywood with some Spanish, Spanish, very very sexy girls that were next to Andres as always, because he loves to be surrounded by sexy girls, So I was like, I need to be friends with this guy, Like, I was like, we need to be friends, and like I thought more like Andres was more like, because these girls invited me, they were trying to make it at the Standard Hotel a party, and Andres was getting the location. So when I saw Andres, I thought Andres was more like the DJ or so on, because of how he was looking and to the girls and so on. And when we started talking next to the pool, we started talking about business and, like what he was doing there, what he has done, what I was doing. And I was like, yeah, he's definitely not the DJ. Like he's the big fish here. Like, and
Love it.
and yeah, that's how we met.
No, but
That's a great
tell them
meet
about
cute
the
story.
drink origin.
Yeah.
Tell them about the
Yeah.
drink
Yeah.
and your experience with it.
Right. So I grew up like here in the south of Ecuador, because my family has a sugarcane company. That's the biggest landlords here in the south of Ecuador.
Wow.
and the only sugarcane company here at south of Ecuador. There's 5 in the country, and this is the one in south of Ecuador. So I grew up, like next and close to lots of employees here in the farm side of the city, and I grew up always drinking this punch, that it's called in Spanish horchata. We don't really call it like that because in the Spanish colony, all the horchatas that the Spanish brought us, well, they didn't brought us here. The Spanish name horchata to the typical drink in each country, the indigenous or the typical country in each country. So people just get confused. For example, the horchata in Mexico has milk. Ours has nothing to do with milk. It's
Right.
brewed from herbs and flowers, water with herbs and flowers. It's a brewed from herbs and flowers. So, you know, it's very common and popular all around the country here, especially in the Andean side. Like Quito, Cuenca, Loja, and that's what I drank in my house my whole life. My mom never wanted us to drink Coke or any sugary drinks, so we always had lemonade or horchata because water was a bit boring. So
And Juan,
that's
was it something sold in stores like in a brand, or everyone brewed it at home with their own like raw materials or ingredients?
yeah, great question. At that time when I was a child, it was like just at home. Everyone was brewing it at home because at that time people was still not drying the herbs and flowers here.
Got it.
But since it got popular in the hotels and everywhere here in Ecuador, many companies, many startups, entrepreneurs start to drying the herbs, put it in a dry form so that you can just bring it home and dry it yourself. And it's, like very fresh, very, very delicious. It's like a very weak formula, calling it like weak because it's like you just have there, like it's like having a tea of mint, but with all this mix
Yeah.
that we have, like the mint, the lemongrass, the chamomile, and we have many that are like endemic from this part of the Andes, like like the mallow flower, the malva essence, and yeah, that's like how I translate. I told these to Andres because
Yeah.
we were really looking into a superfood Latin product to start with, and we thought that this was a great choice.
Well, let's dive into like the functionality of the beverage. You mentioned a couple of the key ingredients, so like let's talk about why those ingredients, what sort of benefits they have for the consumer, and take us down that path.
Yeah, so the beverage has been drank traditionally because of its antioxidants. Apart from obviously its flavor and kind of being like a cousin to drinking water, it's a lot of the antioxidants that come from the botanicals. So there's 8 different herbs and flowers in it, and the antioxidants deliver everything from digestion to rehydration to regeneration of the body in general. I think if you look at it overall, regenerating your body is probably the best thing that it does. So anything from post workout to being hungover, or to just post lunch to just feeling better, and it definitely also helps with digestion in the sense that the herbs and flowers help to settle your stomach. So it's really great to eat along with the meal. So from a functionality perspective, I would say it's the hydration and the regeneration.
And Andres, how did the branding and the real like latching on to the reggaeton come about? Because obviously the Ecuadorian influence is very authentic and just right from the source of where the drink comes from itself. But like, why did you all decide to lean so hard into that cultural element from like a marketing branding perspective?
Yeah, I
Well, and
mean,
explain to the audience and to me what reggaeton is.
Yeah.
okay, yeah. So reggaeton is basically a musical genre in Spanish that explains in a very simplistic manner. It's like hip hop in Spanish, but it's blended with different genres from dembow to reggae to salsa, etc., in one genre called reggaeton. So basically, in a very simplistic way for the naysayers to understand, it's like it's like hip hop in Spanish, but it's a lot more upbeat, very much more dancey. So the reason why, I think that music is such an important vessel of communication. A lot of times, like the music communicates everything from, say, love to relationships to culture to social beings. That I wanted to do something initially where it was centric around social impact, and you know and Juan wanted to do something around sustainability as well. So we were like, hey, why don't we like merge these ideas and impact the earth and impact people, but like what's the communication tool? Because a lot of the, call it, better for you products that are very sustainability and social impact minded, it's a little boring, it's a little granola, it's a little too nature. Why don't we make it fun and loud and bold and use these kind of languages to be able to communicate cool things and to communicate and to make this thing much more pop culture-ish?
Yeah, when you mentioned the vehicle and you talk about some of the old school natural foods and you talk about the vehicle, like the first thing that came to my mind was like Birkenstocks, which to your point is not the most appealing vehicle, right? But I'm curious, and I keep getting off topic today, but if I were to listen to one track that was like representative of reggaeton, like hit
Bro,
me with that track.
you're so out of the loop. Like Bad Bunny is like maybe the most popular artist on the planet right now, bro. Like come
Maybe
get
it
with
is.
the culture, bro.
I would say, I mean,
So
for Kyle to get indoctrinated, go look at Daddy Yankee Gasolina. Kyle's gonna be jumping on the wall.
Yeah, yeah. I
I'm
I guess
psyched. I'm not
I've
gonna
also
listen
lived
to it
in.
until I have a Chiki Chiki
Because
Boom
you
in my
probably
hand, and then we're
heard
gonna
the
do
song.
this.
You 100% heard the song in your life.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
The song's like, I don't know, like 15 to 20 years old. So the Bad Bunny
Okay.
stuff obviously is more young, modern, and fresh. But Daddy Yankee Gasolina, 1000% you've heard at some point in your life.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm in.
And just from like a pure business perspective, like Latin influence, Latin culture, the wave of immigration we've had in America, like the Latin consumer is like taking over like massive market share. So I just think it's brilliant from there's all these actual just like real strong business cases to leverage that, and y'all are doing it authentically. Where I know we've seen some large brands try and do some similar things that I would say lack that authenticity. And when you talk about really like driving distribution in a place like South Florida, I've spent 2-3 years of my adult life there, and like it's brilliant because like that's where like your hardcore early adopter consumer like really should be. So just touch on that a little bit more for the audience, that we talk a lot about like, hey, you get into the natural channel with Sprouts and Whole Foods, but I think this is a little different, and just want to give the audience some education on that strategy.
Yeah, so like Latins, depending on the geography and the age group, millennial based, it's like 22% millennials are Latin, 26% of Gen Z
Wow.
is Latin, 30% of teenagers are Latin in America, and it's very
Wow.
underrepresented.
Yeah.
And we want to have something that we can be proud of. We don't necessarily like to consume your stereotypical Latin drink, which is like 50 grams of sugar. We like to drink something that's like 3 grams of sugar. And
Yeah.
why do we get forced to be like pigeonholed in like this is what's Latin? So,
Mm-hmm.
I think it was something for us that we can be proud of, and that we can be like, this is one of ours. So if you look at like the
Mm-hmm.
better for you space, Latin foods, I would say that like Izquieta foods. Sorry, I'm in a very loud coffee shop in randomly in Brooklyn, not in like the hipster part of Brooklyn, in like South Brooklyn. Uh,
Andres is out selling product into stores, and he made time to be on the podcast today. So y'all can forgive the background noise because he's hustling.
Yeah, and I keep going on mute and unmute so you don't hear the background. But yeah, so anyway, we to us that was very, very important, is to be able to give something that was reflective of the culture and reflective of kind of where we believe that culture was at now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. I'm curious from like a CPG branding perspective. There's quite a bit of backstory here. From the regenerative side, help us to better understand, what sort of regenerative practices are taking place in this Valley of Longevity. Let's kind of double click onto the Valley of Longevity itself. I think you mentioned earlier, Juan, that it's a blue zone. It's represented in National Geographic. So talk a little bit about that. And then part two, how are you then communicating all of that agricultural stuff into, you know, the package or to your consumers via, you know, this product.
Right. Yeah. So as you were saying, you know, like we are very, very lucky to be located here at the Valley of Longevity in south of Ecuador. This place got very, very it's been popular, you know, it's been like lots of studies, like researchers from Harvard, great universities have been here like from years now. But after the COVID-19, the pandemic, the place got like very, very popular because lots of people, you know, like from Europe, Singapore, Australia, US have been moving here, especially for retiring, and because of some
Wow.
of the things that you were mentioning, such as, you know, like a blue zone. It's one of the most biodiverse places in the world. You know, if it's we are very close to a point where it's called to be the most biodiverse place in the world. So you know, like we are lucky, very lucky to be here. Maybe this is not the best place to show regenerative agriculture because the place it's already like very, very rich, has a very, very rich soil. Even though we are doing like most of what we're doing, it's very, you know, like into regenerative agriculture. You know, like for example, here at the farm, uh, we are trying to imitate nature in the wild forest. You know, that's like kind of the vision and what we do here. Like, you know, like for instance, we use native mountain microorganisms that, as you know, like when they decompose everything that falls on the ground, you know, like
Yeah.
naturally. So
Mm-hmm.
we also have microorganisms that we got from, you know, like from some other places, obviously with certification, because that's something important I have to mention. As our product is USDA organic
Yeah.
certified, the farm it's also USDA organic certified. We're also looking forward now and applying for the regenerative certification. But going back to this certification, it's very important to mention because we've done like many certifications, and this is a certification that is really worth to do because it's very, you know, like transparent. They really go through these audits because in the CPG industry, you get maybe in New York, you know, a punch made from herbs and flowers that it's USDA organic certified and comes from Ecuador, and you really, you know, like don't know about that traceability. But I
Yeah.
can tell you that this certification, it's like very, like the audits, the like just like last week, I got an audit from some guys of the certifier, and they took 68 samples of soil here at the farm, you know, like 68.
Wow.
Like we will all day long with the guys, like going around the farm. They took water, they took air, but from soil itself was 68. So it's a pretty good one. You know, they take all to the lab, and you know, like I mean, like since since we got this, every time that I see a USDA organic product, I hope it works like everywhere, like in the world, like this. But since then, you know, like I feel very comfy when I get products that have the certification, because we've done like many others, you know, that are more like, you know, like you pay the fees, you go through through a process that is more like paying the fee, filling out forms, but
Yeah.
it's not really, you know, what it should be like this one. So you know, like going back to what we do here, like we got also, you know, like we got like multi-natural microorganisms, and we also got some certified ones. We got like 19 different ones that we use here at the farm. And with microorganisms, I guess you guys talk a lot about this, but you know, like it's very, very interesting and helpful when you get familiar with them, because they are really the ones that can take care of the soil and the ones that can fix the soil when it's
Yeah.
needed. You know, like here in South America, like 30 years ago, the soil was considered like a place where you can do whatever you wanted, you know. And And right now with these concepts, as you know, like nowadays with the organic, the agroecological, the regenerative agriculture that are getting very big, people is getting very very mindful about that, and people is understanding, you know, like the place is the soil is a living body, and people is
Mm-hmm.
giving that place to the soil. They are really doing that. It's like, you know, like what I see, and the new generations are very interested about that. And you know, like it's simple, you know. It's, I mean, it can get very complicated. I'm learning every day, you know, like there's for sure a lot to learn. But if you try to put it in a simple manner, you know, like you feed the soil, you know, like what you try to do is like feed the soil and give it back their natural properties,
Yeah.
you know, as it was in the past, you know. And microorganisms are like a way, when you go to a forest, you know, and you see all these leaves like a pillow
Yeah.
in the floor, you know, like a mattress of
Mm-hmm.
leaves, you know. That's why you see all that that forest is not getting any spray, is not getting any irrigation. It's like it's never been sprayed, and you see everything green and all the biodiversity working perfect. And it's like because of that, you know, like it's not that hard to get it. So
Juan, let
that's
me
pretty much what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, that love it. Love how the rigor of the USDA certification, and you touching on that. It sounds like you're employing some biologicals or some microorganisms, which is really cool. Just back us up, like for the audience that hasn't looked at the website, and y'all's page on this is like really cool, and we'll link it in the show notes. But just like 40-acre farm, describe the setting, describe some of the practices and the implementation, because I know there's like a deforestation, reforestation play. So like just break some of that down for folks in terms of practices and kind of setting the scene.
Right. Yeah. So the place that we got here, like you said, we did a big job in reforestation. We have planted so far, because we got it last year. We have planted so far in this year more than 80,000 plants, and
Wow.
more than 8,000 trees, because we have an
This
inventory
is just
Wow.
on that 40-acre plot.
yeah. It's insane. I mean,
Wow.
like I'm not sure, you know, like if the if the podcast shows also like a video, and you want me to show like some video of what we do, is like we have like here all the crops with mulch. Like we really prepare the soil, you know, like in the best way possible. Because what we're trying to do is like we're trying to show to all these farmers around here that we're used to grow these botanicals like from 500 years ago,
Yeah.
to do it in the proper way. Because people here, like, you know, with all the respect, lots of people, like what I was saying here, like the 30 years ago and nowadays, they just had bad habits, and these bad practices it's been due, you know, like maybe because of lack of knowledge, and they keep doing it. For example, you see here the irrigation systems. We implemented micro irrigation for our plants, you know, to try to we did it a very niche one, to try to replicate a slow rain, you know. But if
Mm-hmm.
you see what people does around here, is like people normally, obviously there's many factors around the lack of knowledge, lack of
Resources,
resources, there's
technical
poverty, you know.
assistance. Yeah.
But yeah, but technical assistance. But I don't think that's a justification, because you could like in any way like do it in a proper way. It's more lack of knowledge. For example, the irrigation here, most of the people, what they do is like they use gravity irrigation, you know, where they build small water canals in order to take advantage of the water. So water irrigates their plantation, they just do the canals like themselves and go around the plants, you know. But as a result, you find excessive use of water, that it's crazy, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And you do not provide at the same time the same amount of water to each plant, so you don't have consistency. And finally, you end up producing a lot of erosion to the soil, because all this water, while it's going, you know, it's producing erosion. And it's the same with for example, the you see here like the places where they put the cows step where they want, they poop where they want, and that all that organic matter goes directly to the soil. And as you know, the soil needs, like the soils to be decomposed, needs to
Mm-hmm.
be, to go through the process. So obviously, I don't want to make this sound like that bad, because you cannot compare these to and not, I don't want to criticize, but if you compare it to an industrialized countries, like this is like, I'm talking about, like here in 5 acres, 10 cows, which is, but like if we go and we see the reality, it's like you cannot compare. I'm just here, like trying to going back to your question, show you where we're at, what are the practices here. Like, for example, burning is allowed here as is legal as an as ancestral practice. Like people here, like when they, instead of going and cutting all the grass, they do controlled burnings. And you will say, like they are crazy, but like if you compare that to the fossil fuels of big industrial
Right.
countries, you cannot
Mm-hmm.
compare. I mean,
Right.
it's like, but still, those are things again that I think that are because of lack of knowledge, that um, are getting better and better every day, because like people is getting better education, people is, like trying to help. Obviously, the continent, the country is going towards a better place, a better planet, looking forward to do the things in a better way. So it's
Right.
getting better, but as of now, it's just a bit of what I can tell you.
Yeah, and I think the term lack of knowledge, I would rephrase that to be just be like the wrong knowledge, and I think that
Mm.
this is prevalent in a lot of the conversations we have,
Correct.
where we've taken these concepts of like, hey, this is the industrial way, or this is a better way of doing something, forgotten that indigenous wisdom, and it's really relearning how to work with nature and with ecosystems in mind, rather than think that like we humans can develop a better system. And it sounds like that's what you're doing at the farm, which is incredible. And now, Andres, I want to take that part two question and give it back to you. And so, like, you're doing all these incredible things at the farm level. How are you communicating that to your consumers via the brand?
Yeah, so a lot of it is, basically reeling in people into the brand first, and obviously kind of like dripping them into discovery. So as of recent, obviously, like on the website, we have that information. On social, we communicated it. But since Juan's actually girlfriend, who is incredible at social media,
Yeah.
she recently started to do a lot of the storytelling for us.
Wow.
So she's been going down to the farm and she's been documenting a lot of the stuff for us, and she's been making it fun as well. So we're starting to communicate all those touch points, and we're going to be putting out probably around like 5 videos a week on TikTok. We're starting right now with like 1 to 2, but probably by September it'll be at around 5 videos per week, where we're documenting on a daily basis, like all the happenings from the farm itself.
Wow.
So I think it's just about explaining to people where your drink comes from. There's no brands that can really do that in the beverage space. There's not, um, from a regenerative perspective. Um, I think there's a recent beverage brand that became regenerative organic, but I think it's only one component of it. Our 95% of our ingredients are herbs and flowers, and all those come from our farm. And there's no other brand in the beverage space that can say that. So it's like you're drinking your products from Mother Nature, and that they're being farmed in a way that what Juan just said is like no one can say that. They're buying from these aggregator ingredient suppliers. I've met a lot of these guys at Expo West, and they're like blown away with what we're doing. They're like, it's not even, it's wasting my time to try to talk to you because you're doing something so next level. You're like the Apple, Tesla of ingredients, as opposed to everyone else just buying them and they don't care. But I think it's important to communicate that to the audiences. Like one of our new slogans is regenerate your body, and I think that term regenerate isn't necessarily widely used in the food beverage space. And when you start to discover why regenerate, apart from the ingredients actually because of the antioxidants of regenerating your body, we also explain to you that that the product comes from a regenerative manner, and explaining to them what that is. So we're starting to also do tutorials as well, where we're gonna have Juan basically explain and call it like a 3-part series what that means and why that's so
Yeah.
important. Because audience education and giving them the reason why is so important. Like for instance, a big part of the inspiration that we had was the movie Kiss the Ground. Um, and
Yeah.
when we started Chiki, it was around the same time that documentary came out. And Juan and I, we wanted to do good, and Juan was talking to me about regenerative and stuff. And I had heard about it, but I wasn't so educated about it. And then when I
Yeah.
finally watched it, I told Juan, like, bro, you got to watch this thing immediately. And it's all the things that he had been telling me, but I had never seen it structured in like a documentary that was easy
Yeah.
to watch and say, call it 90 minutes. This became something that to us was like a big cornerstone where we knew that this is what we needed to do. So, it's about a slow roll and an education of how you communicate to that to the consumers. Like, for instance, our new packaging on the front of the bottle, there's a smaller text that says made of regenerative botanicals. So we realized that like some of the things were important to consumers and some were not. So we've been doing some playing around in terms of like placement of slogans and text and stuff to focus on what's more important. And I think that once they realize like about that process and where things come from, then it becomes very important. I think
Yeah.
over time, the more knowledge that consumers can be taught, then they start to ask more questions. It's the same thing. It's the same reason why now the food system, like organic, is such a big thing. Like 20 years back, it was not. I
Yeah.
think one of your questions was going to be like, how do we make this more prevalent by 2050 or whatever? I think
Yeah.
it obviously it's a domino effect that needs to happen, but it starts with the brand because they're like the sea shepherds in terms of like
Mm-hmm.
they're the ones that if they don't do it, then no one else is going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that banding together and ultimately when consumers find out about these things, like for instance, in certain categories, I only buy and support brands that source from a regenerative manner because I know what that means to the ingredients. So I
Mm-hmm.
know that I'm buying the best product possible and that even it's better than even an organic product because they're going the extra mile, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really about consumer education, and it's really about TikTok because that's really how you can really explain things in an
Yeah.
easier manner because you have to kind of like dumbify things. And I hate to say
Yeah.
TikTok is kind of dumb, but I'm a little older. I think it's kind of dumb, but I see and I respect the relevancy of the platform and the importance of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and TikTok is really about making things fun as well. So it's kind of like the motto of Chiki. Like we use
Yeah.
reggaeton as our language, Spanglish as our language. TikTok is a communication method, right? So you're educating people about in a fun manner. Instagram can be more like informative, right? It can be
Mm-hmm.
like neutral in the sense that it doesn't have to be fun. It can just be like information. With TikTok,
Yeah.
a lot of times it needs to be fun in order for people to engage with it.
Yeah. That there's so much to pull out of there, and I think something you said towards the beginning around just like regenerative is not the leading value prop. Like we continue to hone in on that, I think, in this podcast. And I just put out a blog post about it, which is like, you still have to lead with the core fundamentals of here's the health and wellness benefit you're getting. Here's it tastes awesome, right? Here's it's better for you in this capacity. But then you back that up with the regenerative education on the back end to say it is accomplishing all that because of regenerative or that is a part of it.
Yeah,
Um,
and if you think about it too, like for instance, like depending on your category, like you know, at the end of the day, consumers are going to pick flavor first. You can
yeah.
do all the greatest things in the world, but if your shit don't taste good, it ain't gonna move off the shelf. It ain't gonna get rebought. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Yeah.
Right.
or if you use too much of one type of sweetener, it becomes with a disgusting aftertaste. So,
Yeah.
but I think the reason why this is important is because when I initially tasted the chicky that came from the farm that Juan did like some initial batches and tests with, that was like a mind blowing taste. That the prior Chiki, which was farmed from an organic manner, versus this regenerative manner where it was Juan basically controlling every single herb that came from his property, it was night and day. And that's important because that impacts flavor. Because remember the way that things are being sourced, it's you have mint on one row, you have flowers on one row, chamomile on another row, roses on another row, lemon verbena on another row, and all those nutrients and minerals in the soil are moving and they're impacting each other, and the flavor then gets impacted, right? So, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
in those times, then you can use even less sugar because the botanicals are so aromatic and they're so flavorful that it does impact flavor. So that's why if you think about it, like in the background, it's so important to be doing this in this manner because it impacts the most important buying decision of the consumer, which is flavor. You know, um, so I think it's not the hero in terms of what you communicate to the consumer, but it's the hero on the back end in terms of what's your secret sauce. And truthfully, it's hard. And there's I'm sure there's going to be brands that are going to want to try to get on this wave, and obviously I encourage everyone to do it. But it's hard. It's very hard to do good. It's like 10 times easier to not do good.
For sure.
It's 10 times
sure.
easier to do what every other brand does. Even it's 10 times easier just to buy from an organic supplier of botanicals. Like that would be the logical thing. There's been moments where I've been like, dude, this is so stressful and expensive to do things in the right way. But we obviously have a long-term vision for this, and we see the impact that this has on our quality of product, and ultimately this makes the product also more defensible because there's no one else that can say that they do that. So in the moment that consumers and retailers start to put this as a higher priority and that actually take action on it, because it's one thing to treat it as a priority, and it's one thing, and usually they'll do that, say, for greenwashing. And then secondly, more importantly, it's really more so to actually take action on it and say like, hey, we're gonna retailer X, we're gonna curate a regenerative section in our store. Then that's gonna give opportunity for these people and brands and founders that are doing the right thing. That finally they can get the spotlight on them. So I think that that's why it's so important, and that's how we're gonna win in the long term.
You're speaking our language. And I'm going to try to do something that I've never done before, but I really like the way you painted the picture of the different row crops right next to each other and how they're different. And I want to talk about why that's important. And I might completely butcher this. I have no idea. But if you think about the soil is essentially like a digestive system, a communal digestive system for all of the plants that are in that field. And if you have all of the same type of food, for example, let's say think monocrop corn, row after row after row of corn, they're all vying for the same nutrients out of that system. Whereas when you have different crops right side by side, they are looking for different nutrients and putting different nutrients back in that can be complementary, which gives the plant the opportunity to get what they need and help the other biodiverse plants nearby, which can give, to your point, more aromatics, more nutritional density, more potency from like a botanicals perspective. And I think that's a really critical piece that we should touch on because it's hard to comprehend that. And that to me is why it's so cool that you're doing this. And I think this is the first application we've seen with this botanical, super antioxidant rich beverage, and why it's so important for consumers. Because to your point, there's vitamin water out there. There's all these other ones out there that are likely using synthetic additives versus real nutrient dense plants that are benefiting both the human and the soil and the environment and everybody else. So it's just really, really cool. I want to like really kind of hone in on that particular practice you all are doing.
Right. Yeah. So, and we do that, like all here, it's a polyculture plot, like all our plots, all our beds here, it's actually amazing, because besides having all that, we have like, obviously we have here a full-time agronomist because I'm not an agronomist, like I'm learning every day, but we have a full-time here like leader of the project that it's a 55-year-old engineer that has been doing this from his whole life, and he's very, very passionate about the agroecological practices and so on. So what you just mentioned, Kyle, is so important, because we here also, we're so used to the monoculture, and when you understand what you were saying, like how you treat each one differently, that's the thing that makes the whole difference.
Yeah.
Each one is different, and you treat each one differently. And the
Mm-hmm.
and the soil, like the soil, the universe, the planet is so perfect that for some reason, when you do it in the natural way, it it finds the way of how to give equal proportions to each one, and to keep them all safe. And
Mm-hmm.
obviously, like when you implement and take in considerations some of the things, like the fungi, the bacteria, the all these things. It's the mulch that I mentioned, that we have, like it's like, we have around, like, all this inert grass that we get from the farm, it's all recovered around. So that that also, that also prevents from malesa. How's this word in English? The all the herbs, like the bad herbs that grow,
The
like
weeds.
from
Like the weeds.
Yeah.
yes, all these weeds, like that in
Mm-hmm.
agriculture, you have to, like, keep cleaning years and years. It's like the mulch system, like the inert leaves. It's the best thing that you can do, like, as,
Yeah.
as I said when we were starting the podcast. When you try to imitate what's happening in nature, but in wild nature, maybe, because not all forests, like primary, it's called the word, I don't know if it's the same in English, but it's called primary forests, where we are trying to imitate, because there's also forests that have been very touched by the
Yeah.
human, that
Right.
are maybe
Mm-hmm.
not the best example, to try to imitate. Not always, but when you do what's happening in the primary one, like in the wild, in the real one, things work amazing. When we just started doing this, I was even like a bit worried, because I was looking at all our employees, looking at our agronomists, as this is an alien, like what this guy is trying us, like this guy is teaching us
Yeah.
these crazy techniques, and his theory is crazy. And I was also a bit afraid, because we are investing a lot of money, and
Yeah.
you see all these farmers looking at him as the guy is crazy. So, like, I
Right.
start doubting too, because I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking with him and making meetings, and I'm like, hey, look, we're investing here also a lot of resources. We don't have much time. We really want to
Yeah.
to be the example, but please, let's try to do it. And he's like, take it easy, Juan, like, just read this, or
Yeah.
trying, like, to teach me. And now that the things are flowing and working, it's so amazing, because our farmers, the farmers that are working here, they are all replicating at their in their crops, in their houses, the same thing that they're doing here. So
And
Mm-hmm.
Juan,
initially I thought, why are they not doing this? Is it because it's more expensive? But the answer is no. The
mm-hmm.
answer is just like, like, I would
Yeah.
love like to have all the farmers, to get all the farmers the chance to learn this, because it's simply amazing.
you you're teeing something up that I want to make sure we cover too there, Juan, which is we talk about returning to indigenous wisdom, indigenous knowledge. A lot of time that's returning to feminine wisdom and feminine knowledge. And I know y'all have some specific female farmer kind of empowerment programs and development programs with the farmers that y'all are working with, as well as Andres, tell me if I'm butchering this or not, but I think there was a piece of infrastructure that was
Correct.
rescued that had been abandoned by like the Red Cross. So just like talk about we talk about the soil. We're very good about talking about the soil, but I think a lot of times we skip over that human element. So just talk about some of that programmatic work that y'all are doing.
Right.
Either one.
So like, for all this drying process, besides being this an idea that was already an idea to empower women, and to have all our female farmers, besides empowering them, for some reason women are better than men when treating, like for example, when they are in botanicals, when they are harvesting, when they are harvesting just the leaves, they are a lot quicker, like with the hands, like
Mm-hmm.
it's like, like five ladies, one guy, and you see one next to each other, and the ladies are like, like flying with with all
Yeah.
the like the leaves. So it was a group of ladies, of 32 ladies, that again, since this
Wow.
punch traditional recipe is so popular, these 32 ladies make like an organization, like a legal organization, where they wanted to to plant, harvest at their in their homes, and then they wanted to dry it and to sell it in a dry form. Unfortunately,
Hmm.
their business was not doing well. So it lasts, I think, for a year. And 2 years ago, they abandoned everything that they were doing. So now
Mm-hmm.
that we are here, we appear like Jesus for them, because they are like, like really like like an angel, because now they are doing exactly what they were trying to do, but they are not
Yeah.
investing their money. They just know the practice, because they are very good at that. They've been
Mm-hmm.
doing this, like, like forever. So
Mm-hmm.
but we employ them, and that's what they do, like they do the for us, this group of ladies, the harvesting, the disinfection, the washing, then the drying, then the packing. So
That's cool.
they do the whole, since we in our plots we have more men's, because there's like more work, that more like handwork. But
Mm-hmm.
for all this since we harvest till we pack it, that's all these ladies job that are doing amazing. They are really doing a great job.
That's cool.
Yeah, that is really super interesting, and like you said, feels like a fortuitous. These women are trying really hard to make it to start an organization where they could do what they wanted to do on a regular basis. It's bummer that didn't work out, but just fortuitous timing that you happen to be in the location where you could provide them the same opportunity, right? So that's incredible.
And
Um,
see, and
Andres,
just to mention a last point there, because you wanted to know, do like the human side? I think it's very important to mention that all these people, like all these people in the country, especially in the province, that have been selling to all these, like brands, startups, entrepreneurs, their
mhm,
herbs and flowers, they have been like, I don't want to say abuse, to say the word abuse, because I
Yeah.
don't know if that was a real intention, but they have been, like paid very, very bad and very, very unfair.
Yeah.
And like, so that you have, just to put you an example, mint, lemongrass, like they get paid 35-40 cents per kilo. And if you put the kilos and the work, maybe that's $200-$300 a month, like for a family to live. And sometimes these people is like, okay, I don't need more lemongrass, I don't need more mint, I don't need it. And it's hard, because the fresh herbs, as you know, like they length for like 3-4 days, and then
Right.
they're damaged, like. So
Right.
if you tell to
Oof.
these people that is coming from outside of the city to your company, that you're supposed, to have a contract with them, I don't want your herbs anymore, it's like you're
Mm-hmm.
telling them like, throw them, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
it's very hard.
right.
And for us, in our business model, when you allocate the pennies that the herbs and flowers represent in our drink, we can pay more, like we can pay more for that. So if we pay, let's call it double or 60-70% more of those herbs and flowers, we can change the life of these people, because these people, instead of
Mm.
making 300, if they make 600 or 550, it's already a big change,
For sure.
and luckily
Yeah,
our business model works towards that.
Love that.
incredible. So I'm curious, what does the future hold for Chiki Chiki Boom Boom? We talked about some distribution, primarily like Florida, Northeast, SoPac. Um, is the future focused on gaining more distribution with the current assortment? Are we thinking about product innovation and adding more SKUs and flavors? Are there different channels or categories we're interested in getting into? Like, what does the next 3 to 5 years look like for Chiki Chiki Boom Boom?
Yeah, so I think, obviously it fully depends on kind of the perspective. I can give you big vision and all that stuff, but I think we have to live in the now, especially in this business because it's so ever changing. But I would say, call it the next 12 to 24 months, it's focusing on the distribution that we have and expanding in those particular regions, and finding and really honing in on why the customer is loving Chiki. I would definitely say that there's an opportunity to say expand into maybe 2 to 3 more SKUs, and we've already identified those flavors based on flavors that we're seeing that moves off shelf, and also more importantly, flavors that we've grown up with drinking in Latin households. Because a big part of Chiki is also to deliver that Latin flavor. So I think from a 12 to 24 month, it would probably be to keep the same vessel, maybe add 2 to 3 flavors. I think over time, the bigger vision is to be the Latin plant-based beverage company of the culture and of the world. And what that means eventually, it's to go into other categories that are adjacent categories where, call it botanical and or other plant-based ingredients would be accretive to what we do. So it could be something like a tea, or it could be something like like a sparkling drink, or it could be something maybe even like a powder. But I think time will tell, and obviously, a lot of times, depending on how things go, either the market predicts it, or obviously, depending on your brand ubiquity, you then can really control and demand that. But the obvious ones would be, call it lemonade, tea, still water, sparkling version of the existing chicky, more flavors of what we have now, and potentially energy. It just depends on, you obviously have to do a market analysis and understand where are the opportunities. Because, some markets,
Right.
some categories are extremely crowded, and it could make sense. But if it's, like I mentioned, energy, it's probably the last category I would go into just because it's so ultra competitive, and differentiating based on product quality is a little tough. You really have to boost up so many other factors, and you're going up against like a Red Bull, you know. Uh,
Right.
so, I think more importantly, it's to really have impact on culture and to really, make people prideful in terms of what the product is, and those that are culturally curious to really, get behind the product and to really support all the things that we're doing beyond like the juice itself. It's also about supporting the farm and the regenerative and the practices and the processes and the impact of the people that we're doing.
Yeah, love it. And the brand is such a vessel for bigger missions. I think that's like the coolest part of and my main takeaway. Which taking us to the macro to close this thing out, Andres, you alluded to this earlier. Final question. Would love to get both of y'all's thoughts on this. How do we get regenerative brands to have 50% market share by 2050?
I think it starts a lot with the buyers, because they're the ones that control. I mean, it's hit and miss. It could be the consumer. It's a mix of the consumer and the buyer, right?
Yeah.
I think the if the buyers, for instance, are putting real plans against it, it's not just about saying regenerative is a priority and then not doing anything about it. It's about saying it and doing it. Meaning, hey, we're gonna have a regenerative section. We're gonna highlight regenerative brands, and there's not that many brands. So like the brands that are it can be the first to market to basically take advantage of those things. It's kind of like what's happening, and we've been very fortunate to be that because we are Latin, but we have a minority-owned certification, and that's provided to be a really big advantage for us, not necessarily on say the consumer side, but a lot of it on the retailer side, where we take prioritization in consideration in bringing on our brand into certain retailers, and then in some cases being spotlighted. So I think if a retailer decides to spotlight it, then that makes it more important and it provides more light to the consumer. Like for instance, I personally think like Whole Foods was very responsible for putting the organic movement front and center, where other grocery stores decided to then catch on to the wave. Like 20 years ago, an organic section in a conventional market didn't really exist, but they followed them because they started to notice that a lot of consumers started to go there. So they're like, oh shit, I can't have them stealing my customers. I need to keep my customers, right? So in that same manner, if regenerative gets prioritized and that story gets told, that's one. I think two, obviously, the consumer needs to needs to demand it. So it's up to, say, brands like ourselves to basically create that education, that awareness to do so. I want to say that obviously three is in the brands that you need to have founders that are inspired and all that stuff. But the reality is, from what I see, the heart and the soul in a lot of CPG companies isn't there. It's more about the money and the exit as opposed to the impact. Whatever, I don't fucking care to say it. It is what it is. I talk to a lot of people. That's the vibe I get,
Yeah.
So, because again, doing the right thing is so hard. It's 10 times harder than doing the easy thing, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it's just way easier. Regenerative is not easy no matter which way, shape, or form you look at it. So like, if you find more brands and founders that care, that put that as a priority in their mission, and obviously as a Gen Z consumer or the Gen Z founder gets more older, more experienced, and they start to take on these endeavors, that's the audience that cares the most, because their universe and their world is falling apart from like a climate change perspective. So I think that I would say that that's obviously one of the most important people. It's obviously the consumer, the retailer, and the brand. But in terms of the order, I would say, it's probably going to be the retailer, because they have the power that then the others follow.
Yeah,
You know,
gatekeeper.
they're the gatekeeper, because if you don't convince them and they don't put a priority, then no one's going to care enough to do it, and consumers aren't going to be educated to understand what it is. Like, for instance, if you go to this retailer in the Mid Atlantic called Mother's Market, no, Mom's Organic Market,
Mom's
right?
Organic, yeah.
Mom's Organic Market is one of the best grocery stores in the country, in my opinion. The way that they farm their ingredients, the way that they source their produce, it's like, dude, second to none. And they're farming regenerative, and they're putting these signs and billboards in the store: regenerative this, organic this, solar power this, wild caught this, blah blah blah. Where I think it's more progressive than any progressive grocery store in Los Angeles. So again, that consumer then is getting inspired and educated as to the why, and then they start doing their homework, and they're like, oh shit, I can only buy this now, and then they start to demand it. Then usually the entrepreneur, will follow, even though the entrepreneur is supposed to be the innovator, as I said, it's very hard. It becomes very challenging to put priority on this.
Well said.
Yeah, I think you made a lot of great points there, and I love the way that you in particular described Mom's Organic Market and that shopping experience, because I really think that retailer education is going to be a critical component of this movement. I personally have not shopped at a Mom's. I would love to, especially after the way you just described that. And kudos to them for being a leader in the space. It's like you mentioned, not an easy thing to do. And we need to recognize and appreciate the efforts that some of the best retail partners are making. So, another big shout out to Moms for what they're doing.
Yeah, and I think, part of it too is in brands like Chiki, in terms of like making regenerative like pop and making it like fun and exciting. Obviously you're going to have 95% of your regenerative brands are going to kind of keep that natural nature granola vibe, which is cool. I'm not saying it's, anything against it. Because that's kind of, it lends itself to that vibe. But I think when you're loud and bold, you're able to make kind of like a bigger claim and statement. So,
Agreed.
It could be something where, a farmer dancing reggaeton on a Chiki TikTok at least gets the attention for the consumer. Like, what is regenerative? What does that mean? And then they start to, do a deeper dive into it. And then they become more like, oh, I only can buy this. It's kind of like the thought of like why a lot of consumers now choose to drink oat milk instead of almond milk, because of the amount of water that it takes to make almond milk is like and to make almonds is like an insane level of water. I'm not that educated on the topic, but I've read very briefly on it, and it's insane. It's insane, right? And that's why things like oat and flax milk and blah 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 are more popular now. But as the consumers get more educated, like me, for instance, when I read about all those things pertaining to almond milk, I don't ever drink almond milk anymore. It's to me like a faux pas. because of the amount of water that it takes to make it, and it's not sustainable. So I think as it's interesting because the gens, like, I describe this as like, okay, the older consumer, call it the old millennial, right? The old millennial will look at a label and just look at like sugar and calorie and like that's it. Maybe a little organic logo, right? The younger millennial consumer, they'll like read the nutrition panel as well, right? The Gen Z consumer will do all that, plus like go on the Instagram, on the TikTok, and on the website in order for themselves to make a buying decision. And obviously for the companies that are doing good, then they become highly prioritized because they check all the boxes, right? So I think that, ultimately the power is in the consumer, but the retailer, as you said, Anthony, is a big gatekeeper to be able to inform that consumer about that. So they all play hand in hand, but they serve their importance on two different levels, and they all have to happen because if the retailer puts forth and decides to make this a big priority, you need to have the demand from the consumer.
Right.
And then ultimately you need to have enough demand from consumer to inspire founders to source things in a better manner.
Amen.
I think you're spot on. They all have to happen in parallel. It's hard to say which is the most important because if any one of those three sectors doesn't take place, none of it really matters, right? So I think you're
totally
spot on. Awesome. Well, guys, super appreciate, the time. It's been very interesting to learn about Chiki as a brand, as a cultural piece, what you're trying to do. Also, we didn't really paint the picture. For those who are not watching, Juan is sitting with what looks like a fake background behind him of the Valley of Longevity, which is like this green paradise with mountains and blue sky and clouds. It's just absolutely beautiful. And he is on the farm. And it's real. So just again, guys, super appreciate the time. Thanks for sharing your story. Just to be clear on the website, it's drinkchiki, CHIKI.com for anybody who wants to learn more or potentially order. I'm assuming you guys do some DTC business there, yeah?
Yeah. Correct.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Drinkchiki.com.
Yeah. Appreciate y'all. Thanks for joining us, fellas.
Thank you, guys. Sorry about the background.
Thank you very much.
For show notes, episode transcripts, and more information on our guests and what we discuss on the show, check out our website, regen-brands.com. That is regen-brands.com. You can also find our Regen recaps on the website. Regen recaps take less than 5 minutes to read and cover all the key points of the full hour-long conversations. You can check out our YouTube channel, Regen Brands Podcast, for all of our episodes with both video and audio. The best way to support our work is to give us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform, subscribe to future episodes, and share the show with your friends. Thanks for tuning in to the Regen Brands Podcast, brought to you by the Regen Coalition and Outlaw Ventures. We hope you learned something new in this episode, and it empowers you to use your voice, your time, and your dollars to help us build a better and more regenerative food system. Love you guys.